Welcome to Henry's Uncle podcast, where you're always loved, never judged.
Get ready to dive deep into open and honest conversations about addiction, recovery, and policy.
Today, our guest Bobby talks about his battle with alcoholism, bipolar disorder, finding proper treatment, being relentless to address his mental issues, and also being open about his disease with addiction. In this conversation, Bobby helps to break the stigma of addiction by sharing his experiences.
Cue to you, Bobby.
And we're live. Today we got Bobby on our the Henry's Uncle podcast today. Very excited to have you, Bobby. Welcome.
Hey, thanks a lot, man. It's good to be here.
So you and I have known each other now for about, I think, going on 15 years. So we got a lot of history. We actually roomed together in college for 3 years? 3 years in college. And then, so I want to give you the floor and talk about your story.
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked me to do this. You know, originally I think I might have been a little hesitant to do it with respect to the anonymity component, but I feel like I have a lot of knowledge and experience that I would be able to share with people, and I hope that it does some good.
Yeah, no.
And, we'll get into the topic in a little more detail, but one of the primary ways that I stay healthy is by trying to help other people. So it's beneficial for me all around.
No, that's wonderful. Yeah. So I know, we were talking this week as we were kind of getting ready for the podcast. One of the things I mentioned to you, going through college was, I never would have thought that you would have had coming out of college, you would have a alcohol, use disorder. Never in my life I would have thought that. So tell us about that whole story and walk us through it.
Sure. Well, the life of an alcoholic is a very interesting thing indeed. It sort of just sneaks up on you before you really know it's there. In my case, I also have bipolar disorder, and I didn't know that I had that either. And I guess maybe around the time 20, 21, 22, I just started to feel different is what the deal was. And I just was feeling uncomfortable all the time in my own skin, and not just a slight uncomfortability, but just like a raging uncomfortability all of the time.
Uncomfortable, how?
Nervous, really, like a nervous feeling. Depression started to happen, but I couldn't recognize it at that time.
So this was all after college, though? Because, in college, you'd think all your friends are alcoholics,
Yeah, well, no, this is after college. I drank... Most people that I know drank alcoholically in college,
right? The
way they drank. Now, they're not practicing alcoholics now, but that form of drinking is alcoholic binge drinking.
Right,
yeah.
I could always separate myself from that and take a night off in college. I didn't have to drink.
Right.
And there were even times where I preferred not to.
Mm-hmm. But I think, I remember senior year, we would... always be calling you to come on out because you would just kind of lay low and watch a movie or whatever.
That's exactly right. And the whole bipolar component, I think that is the biggest underlying cause of the alcoholism. And I think that I was self-medicating. Mm-hmm. There's statistics among alcoholics. Roughly 65% of 65% of people with bipolar disorder also have a comorbid substance abuse condition, and it's primarily alcohol-based. Alcohol, to me, is primarily suited to deal with that. Now, sure, you can find bipolar heroin addicts and bipolar crack addicts and things of that nature, but I think alcohol is uniquely suited to calm anxiety and do things of that nature. Mm-hmm. Over time, when you abuse it doesn't do that anymore, but initially it allows you to basically function in your life.
So when did you start? So you mentioned when you're 21, 22, 23, you started feeling uncomfortable in your own skin. When did the alcohol start becoming a problem?
I think that, there's a great argument that alcohol was a problem from the very beginning. I started drinking when I was probably 14 years old. Now, that doesn't seem like a very healthy thing to do in retrospect. And you're a parent. I'm sure you wouldn't want Henry to start drinking when he's 14. Sure. So that probably has something to do with it a little bit. But when I really started noticing it was in law school. And I'm glad that you brought this point up because I didn't know what was wrong at all. I had no clue.
You hadn't seen doctors?
No, I did. I went to multiple people. I saw multiple, I guess you would say that there's psychologists. I saw a few different psychologists. I saw a therapist. I did have a psychiatrist.
And this is when you were feeling that uncomfortable feeling.
Yeah,
and
and
you just couldn't
no
put
one,
a finger on it.
because I kept repeatedly like drinking too much, and I knew that it was wrong, and I wanted to stop it, and I sought out help, but no one could ever tell me.
So were the physicians just kind of pointing the finger at the drinking versus trying to get more underlying, like what's
Frankly,
going on?
I don't even know. I just feel like they weren't even equipped to get into it at all. Like they didn't, if they have no inkling that there was something wrong with me, that means they're not very good at their job. Because I went into other places and someone would immediately, like the first time I got diagnosed, that psychiatrist picked up on it like that. So
that
some
it was an
people
addiction
do pick
problem?
it up,
Or,
yeah.
Okay.
But then some people don't. So I probably just didn't seek quality help.
Who's the first person that was able to diagnose the bipolar?
A therapist of mine said, and I don't remember the exact quote, but Bobby, it seems to me that you might have bipolar disorder. It's something you should look into. So that's the first person that said anything to me.
Wow.
This is post law school and everything.
But you were feeling it in law school, and then what was the path?
I
from
started
there?
getting, the first time I ever had alcohol withdrawal was in law school. It's a terrifying experience. I don't know if have you guys ever seen anyone with alcohol withdrawal
I have
in
seen
person?
somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, it sucks. It's like
Scary.
the worst panic attack you've ever had. Your hands and like your whole body starts shaking. I remember it vividly because I was out with my girlfriend at the time and the first time I had it, alcohol withdrawal, and some friends from school. And I forget what I did, but I drank too much. And oh yeah, that's right. I punched a hole in the wall because I was pissed off about something. And so the next day I was like, man, this isn't like a very good thing. You've like gotta like calm down on the drinking. And so I didn't drink. And then later on in the night, I just started shaking because I was drinking so heavily that my body needed the alcohol, but I didn't realize it at the time. So that dawning on you is a very strange experience. It's not like the hair stands up on the back of your neck or anything, but you go, oh, this is what I've got myself into.
What was that realization like?
It's pretty weird, frankly. Like it's a strange thing.
And it's not something that stops you from doing it again, right?
No,
you
not at
just
all.
like kind of feel it coming.
I've had alcohol withdrawal so many times, I don't even know if I could count them, but it gets worse every time.
Jeez.
And when you say you're drinking heavily, describe that. Like how many drinks per day were you having in law school?
I would say in law school, and I know how to do the math on standard drinks and equivalency and all that jazz. I think that I would probably have somewhere between 20 and 30 beers every day. If you put it into that.
So like during the day you wake up.
Yeah,
you're
because
having
what
a
happens is
beer.
you start to wake up in the morning and you're sick, like your hands shake and stuff, and you're sick to your stomach, and so you need alcohol. A lot of the time you drink it and then you'll get sick and keep throwing up. So you're kneeling in front of the porcelain goddess with a fifth of vodka in your hand, trying to get some down so you don't throw up and your hands won't shake, but your body won't let you get the alcohol down your system. So you have to keep going until you can actually get booze in your system. It's really, it's pretty terrible. Honestly, it sucks.
Do you, if you think back, why did you start drinking? What was the cause? Was it because of your uncomfortability, the anxiousness?
What would happen is with bipolar, I should do it more justice. It's not necessarily just some like a blanketing feeling of being discontented. It is you get lost in weird thought patterns and things, and your mind goes different places because it extends beyond the realm of like a normal person's mood swing. It'll kind of go like this and maybe it goes up like this. A bipolar mood swing can go
way up and way down.
And it won't do it like that.
Yeah.
It'll
over time.
Over time it will.
Yeah.
So you can get lost in these moods for months on end.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And in depression, and I'm sure all of you have felt depression at times, it's more like you're not sitting there like in the corner crying. It's just that you've lost the zest for life. Nothing is pleasurable. Nothing is interesting. Hey, Bobby, would you like to come to dinner tonight? No, thanks. I'm going to sit at home and stare at the wall. Everything is just boring and you don't have energy. And I have lots of energy naturally. And then it goes away. And I'm on lots of medication right now. You guys would be in a coma in the corner if you were on this much medication. And I still have energy.
Yeah.
So when that goes away, you know something's wrong.
Mm-hmm. So when you first met that therapist, did you start getting medicated? And then, does it help with that zest of life or like any of those feelings? Like, is it still a roller coaster?
To a large degree. My life I've learned to be able to deal with it. it is very difficult all the time for a lot of reasons, but the medication definitely helps. And that's a long process to get that correct. Multiple practitioners have told me in their time doing it over 30, 40 years that it takes generally somewhere between 6 to 10 years for a person with bipolar disorder to get on the correct medication regime.
Wow.
Which is a long time.
Ridiculous.
So I first started taking bipolar drugs when I was 29, I think, maybe 28 or 29.
Big
I'm
gap
33.
between 23 and
And I'm 33 now, yeah. The normal onset of bipolar disorder among people is somewhere around the age of 25. Mm-hmm. So you can feel the rumblings of it coming, but you don't get it.
People forget that the brain doesn't fully develop till you're about 24, 25 years old.
Right.
So you're going through all those different hormones and everything coming up, through your teenage years and then your college years. And then really it's about 24, 25 that your brain is finally fully developed.
Exactly.
So not only is it difficult to get the right medication, I'm sure even just medication adherence is always difficult.
Well, yeah, for sure. So there's a doctor in Utah. He goes by the name of Dewey Pham. You can look him up. He's a great doctor. He works at the University Neuropsychiatric Institute. It's called UNI. And we talk a lot about bipolar disorder and how it all works. It's such a different animal. And you have no idea what the hell's even going on inside your own mind. When you do encounter a doctor or a nurse or medical professional, therapist, fill in the blank, who does understand, it's extremely powerful because they get you. You don't have to convince them. There's no convincing that needs to be done. They just watch your behavior and they're like, you're bipolar. That's the other thing about bipolar disorder. Imagine this for a second. Imagine getting some kind of condition, a health condition, and everyone tells you have it and you take medication for it, but yet there's absolutely zero test to confirm that you have it. It's a purely observational diagnosis.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I can't go get a blood test and they go, oh yeah, you have bipolar disorder.
Right.
So a lot of time in the back of my own head, I'm like, do I even really have this? Like, what is going on? Because there's no actual proof.
Yeah.
So it gets you to like second guess yourself. It's a strange thing. Like, man, do I really need these medications? Mm-hmm. But then I realized that I do. So
I want to go back, to you back in law school. So you're going through law school, and then you mentioned you're seeing quite a few psychiatrists trying to find out what's going on. They can't really help you out, it sounds like. And then when you graduate law school, this is where I want to touch on as well, because this is a very traumatic point in your life as well. Was you mentioned it was 6 years ago, a little over 6 years ago.
That my brother died?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
June 30th, 2013.
Yeah, 2013. So right after you mentioned it was a month after you graduated law school. So a big moment in your life.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with this, and then all of a sudden, the news breaks.
Yeah, that was a hell of a deal too. And for the record, my brother was in recovery. He was sober almost 2.5, 3 years at the time, and I'm so proud of him. But yeah, it was terrible. I got home, and to be honest with all you guys, I barely made it across the finish line in law school. Mm-hmm. Totally. Barely made it across. I made it across. I missed so much class and everything. I didn't go do anything. I just so happened to be pretty smart so I can get by, for lack of a better term, but I almost didn't make it. And then I got home and I was kind of like, I made it. Everything's good. And then one night, the police at my parents' door came right in. I knew when I saw the police, I said, don't answer the door. That's what my response was. So when police come to your door in the middle of the night, they're not like, hey, man, we want to ask you a couple of questions about your favorite TV show. They're there to tell you something bad's happened, right?
Right.
And that did happen. And that was a whole even stranger experience because for listeners, my brother, John Persen Jr., he was a Granite Mountain hotshot. So he's a wildland firefighter. And he died in the Yarnell Hill fire, which happened on June 30th, 2013. And the crew was 20 men, and 19 of the men died. The only person that lived was the lookout.
Wow.
So it was a terribly painful experience, but it being in so public, it was everyone, it's like I was soothing everybody else. People would come up to me and give me a hug. You know, your brother just died. And people come up and they start hugging you and crying. And you're sitting there like, what the hell, man? You should be giving me a hug.
Right.
So that was very difficult too. And I guess I went further into drinking.
How are you able to cope with that? I mean, like with bipolar disorder at that time, like coping must have been
basically,
that much more
I felt
difficult.
like I was kind of like lost in quicksand or somewhere out in the galaxy, and I have no idea where I was. I was just totally lost.
Yeah.
And eventually, I crashed and burned. So the only way you're really gonna get better is the plane has to crash. Mm-hmm. And they have to go looking for it, and it has to be on CNN for 4 months straight where they look for the airplane.
Yeah.
You know, like something bad has to happen. Mm-hmm. Generally. I mean, some people just go, man, I'm good to go. But when you're so into the process that you have physical dependence to it, mm-hmm. it's a entirely different animal.
So was this the trigger that just accentuated like what was already going on? Was this kind of the beginning of like really drinking hard?
I think so to a degree, because I can remember the experience. So I went like 2 months after my brother died, I went to the coast, and I invited one of my good friends from law school, and he was there with his wife and kids, and we had a good time. But I also had a gal that I went to high school with coming down to meet me. I always liked her, just a cute girl. And I lied to her and said, oh, we don't have any room at the beach. There's so many people here that you can't come down. And then this guy Dan and his wife and kids left. And then I stayed at the beach by myself drinking for like, I don't know how long, maybe like 5 or 6 days.
Wow.
And eventually I had to call my parents and be like, I don't know what's going on. I'm kind of confused. I feel like I don't know where I'm at.
Just by yourself for 5-6 days? Like,
yeah.
Were you eating? Were you?
It was a weird experience. It was like I was like in a trance or something.
Like a binge.
Yeah,
like really
exactly.
binging.
I vividly remember the only thing I had to eat. This is such a funny comment, but I remember eating raw bacon out of the refrigerator, and I was just drinking liquor, like any liquor that was in the cabinet. So
wow,
there was a lot of liquor in there. Well, yeah. I'm not gonna like go into detail, but there was a lot of liquor. So I was drinking a lot, and eventually my parents had to come down, and that was the very first time after that I had to go to a psychiatric or a hospital. It's a psychiatric hospital. So anytime anyone goes to a detox, that's a psychiatric hospital. It's a psychiatric thing. That's the first time I'd ever been to a mental hospital before. And oh my, man, I tell you what, you guys, thank God, will probably never actually see the inside of one of these places, but it's a very interesting experience. A whole different subculture of people that the world pretty much has nothing to do with.
Yeah.
Among these people, there's doctors, lawyers, there's people who are homeless, there's people from all walks of life. But it was my first experience in there. And having gone to multiple mental hospitals, I actually am sort of nostalgic about them. And we were talking about this a little bit before the podcast started, is I like being around other people like me, just like everybody does.
Right.
People are seeking,
community.
Community.
Right?
That's exactly the right word, Greg.
Yeah.
And that is, when you're in there, everyone's like you. So me saying something to perhaps you guys that I think would be like, oh my God, they're going to think I'm crazy. If I say it to them, they're just like, oh, whatever, man, who gives a shit, So it's just a different experience.
So walk us through when you went to your first detox. Tell the listeners what it's like going through detox.
And were you admitted overnight? Like, was this an overnight?
Yeah, I was there for like a week.
A week. Okay.
You stay for a long time, generally.
Right. And was this detox in Oregon?
Yeah. So I've for the wonderful audience out there, if you're in need, Cedar Hills Hospital is probably the best hospital in town for that. Even though I think it has some problems too. But what it's like is, here's what happens. So you have to make let's do it this way. So first you try to get help at an actual hospital. So it'll go something like this. Yeah, what are you here for? Doctor, this is what's going on. I've been drinking 20 to 30 drinks every day for the last 5 or 6 years. I'm very physically dependent. As you can see, my hands are shaking. I've been vomiting, diarrhea. I've been sick forever. Can you do anything for me? Now, initially, they'd be like, yeah, totally. And what they do is they give you benzodiazepines. So medication that is for, generally speaking, for anxiety. They use it in a lot of different contexts, but that's the medication that they'll give you because GABA A is the chemical that alcohol works on, and GABA A is benzodiazepines too. So that's why it works.
It blocks getting the
drug
feeling.
It basically fills in for the alcohol that would have been there had you not stopped drinking. Mm-hmm. But getting up to that point is hard. And then after a few times, I would go to the hospital, and the doctors knew me, and so they wouldn't want to give me anything. And then I also think as time went on, with the opioid problem and everything else that's happening, doctors are more hesitant to prescribe medication. So then it becomes, hey, you have to go to the detox. Well, that's great, but that shit's really expensive. That can be like $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. Not everyone can afford that.
Not covered by health insurance.
No, for a week.
For a little small session, yeah. And so that's what happens. Now, going into detox, basically, it's kind of a full holistic process. There's going to be social workers there. There are going to be art therapists there. There are going to be psychiatrists there, psychologists there, all different kinds of people. And you're seen by basically a team of people, and they oversee your care.
Well, that's good to hear that it's a team.
It is. And you're there with, I don't know how many people are generally there. Sometime we're between, in your own little unit or whatever, maybe 15, 20 people. Mm-hmm. And they keep you as long as they want. They want to make sure that you have because what they're worried about with alcohol is not, a lot of people don't know this, but heroin, you're not going to die of heroin withdrawal at all. Won't do anything to you. You're going to get sick. You're going to like puke, have diarrhea, be cranky.
Alcohol is like the worst.
Alcohol will kill you.
Yeah.
Benzodiazepines will kill you. Crack, you're not going to have, if you stop smoking crack, you're not going to have withdrawal and die. That's just not what happens. But some people don't know that about alcohol. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's really scary. So I had a seizure one time. And since that point, I was like, oh my God, give me some medicine. Like, I'm not trying to die here.
Right.
So even getting into these places is hard. You have to like call, they're booked. You could show up and they take you back and ask you a bunch of questions. Then they say, you got to come back in 2 days. We won't have your bed for 2 days.
Wow.
Now that's kind of hard. I've had multiple doctors tell me at just your standard run-of-the-mill hospital, sorry, we can't give you anything. Your best option is to go home and keep drinking. True story. I've had that told to me multiple times. I've had family members present for it who can attest to it. But that's what they say.
That's so funny.
And you're just like, what the hell, man? Like, I'm just trying to get some help here.
So as you were saying, when you're talking to these physicians and you're saying, I want some medication or like behavioral therapy, what do you think is more effective? I mean, it sounds to me that there's no silver bullet with medication, that, when you were feeling like you had this community around you, that you felt understood, and that it's more of like a behavioral thing along with the medication.
I think medication is paramount because, look, I mean, I'm already here telling you guys most of this stuff. So for bipolar disorder, I take lithium, famous song by Nirvana.
Yep.
And that's what this song's about. And because he was bipolar. And I also take lamotrigine, which is an anti-seizure medication that's used for bipolar disorder also. And both of those medications in concert are extremely good for me. Awesome. I feel way better.
Awesome.
Now, I'm on here accentuating all the bad times, because if I came on here and said, hey, man, my life's so great, that's not going to help anybody.
Right.
And my life, frankly, isn't that great. I mean, it's getting a lot better. But medication is a huge thing. Another thing is you have to get outside of yourself. So I'm doing this right now. I don't have the option to sit and stew in my own brain and go over thoughts over and over again, because I'm talking with you guys.
Right.
So something like this is great. So if you spend a lot of time by yourself, it's harder. And then I also like to spend time by myself because it's hard for me.
Yeah. So you feel like you're shedding the stigma. I mean, what's the whole point about our mission, right?
I never probably expected myself to come on and just publicly tell everyone stuff. Eric knows, I tell everybody.
Right.
Like, yeah. I don't run around saying, hey, everyone, I'm this. But people that I know, I'm not going to go hold up a sign out in the street and tell everybody.
It's not like being vegan or gluten-free.
Yeah. It's like, it's something that affects my life. And so I tell people about it.
Right. Because you want to help others. I mean, honestly.
And the other thing about it too is I probably didn't think, before I had all these problems, I didn't have the slightest clue about people with mental illness. I didn't have a real knowledge of them or anything. So the reason I tell everybody is so that they can go, oh my God, honey, you know what? I was talking to Bobby today. Yeah, you know that nice guy that's just started working at our company? He actually has bipolar disorder. He's an alcoholic. I never would have thought such a thing. That's the reason that I do it, is to show what it really looks like. And it's not necessarily like I'm out on the street screaming, barking at the moon or howling at the moon. Now, that could happen if I didn't take medicine, maybe. But it's good for people to know that I'm just a person like everybody else.
Yeah.
I just happen to have these terrible mental conditions. I could have gotten cancer. I could have lost an eye or a leg or an arm or whatever. But the dice rolled out one way, and this is what happened to me.
And I think that's really revealing for people who get so like concentrated on their own like political perspectives when they hear things like, "Oh, should we be putting money towards mental health, towards addiction services," not knowing that it's the person that's in their office or their neighbor that's the one in need of this. They only think of like the homeless person or the person that's like, quote unquote, leeching from society,
Yeah, there's so many people from all walks of life. It's really sad, actually, the last roommate I had at Cedar Hills was a homeless man. Really nice guy. He's probably in his mid 60s, 6'7", African-American guy. Funny thing of it, he just blew up something with a propane tank, like right before he came in. So like all of his skin was falling off.
Jeez.
No, it's true story. And that was my roommate. Now, I could tell you about all kinds of roommates that I've had, but some of these people just aren't lucky. I'm lucky because my family loves me and they have resources and I'm part of a good community. Yeah. I could just as easily be that guy, but I'm not.
Right.
So that's why doing things like this to me is like a way that I can give back. And I'm going to try all different kinds of things, but this kind of thing is very helpful because it would make my day if all of a sudden my phone rang and it was, "Hey, Bobby, this is so-and-so and I'd like to come talk to you about something. I'd like your advice." I'd be like, hell yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So to be able to help people, because I don't want anyone to show up to a hospital and be sick, really sick, might die, and they say, "Hey, guess what, Vanessa, go home and keep drinking."
Right.
What a joke. That should not even be tolerated in society.
No, it shouldn't.
That's why I am vocal about it.
Yeah. No, so I want to go back. I want to talk about more about your recovery. For you, when was the tipping point where you said enough is enough?
The last time I went to the hospital, Cedar Hills, it was, I think last December. That's right. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, there's a counselor there. His name is Finnegan. And he says to me, we're in a meeting group. And I'm in the wing where people have like some mental problems, but it's pretty light. And there's people who have substance abuse problems. But we got some guys from like the serious mental health unit, like people that are very seriously mentally ill, schizophrenia and things of that nature. And then there were a lot of old people this time. When you look at him, you're like, holy shit, that guy's like 75. And you go, hey, you start talking to him and he's like, I'm 48. Wow. Seriously. Wow. When you abuse your body to that level, it gets wild. You look, it's not good. And there's people on death's door just there. And I looked around and in the meeting, Finnegan goes, Bobby, you've been here quite a few times. And I said, yeah, Finnegan, I think I've been here 10 times or whatever, however many times I've been there. And he goes, what do you think is different this time about everything? Why would you want to stop? And that's what I told everyone that was sitting there. I was like, look, man, I'm getting tired of being in these places where I'm a young man. I should be out living my life. I shouldn't be around here with people who are about to die. So I don't want to come back. And so really the reason I got sober, and I feel great about it. And I had the assistance of medication to do it. So I take a drug called Antabuse. It was originally discovered by two scientists inadvertently. And how they figured it out was they're out like, I forget the exact story, but they were in orchards doing things with trees, and they were putting this chemical down, and some of the guys were like touching it, and then after work they went to the bar and they drank, and they got sicker than hell. Terrible headaches, vomiting, diarrhea, just a nightmare. And Antabuse, that's what it does. It prevents your body from metabolizing alcohol. So you immediately basically get a hangover, but it's not a hangover. Let me tell you that. It's unbelievable how sick you'll get. And you can actually die from drinking while on this medication.
Jeez.
So people go, oh man, this is the phrase they'll say, that's pretty hardcore, man. I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm just doing what I have to do here so I can live. Because without that, I don't think that I'd be able to do it.
You create like a limitation on yourself.
Yeah,
right?
but what happens with it is I still have the decision to take the medication. Now, I have a family member, because I've done multiple times where the doctors suggest, hey, have a family member watch you take your medication.
The adherence part, right?
Yeah, and so alcoholics and addicts are great at being devious and getting their own way. So I would just take all the pills out of there and put replacement pills in that basically looked identical and take them.
Wow.
So then I started drinking again. Oh yeah, are you kidding me? If you really want to drink, you're going to drink. No one's going to tell you not to. Like if I want to drink right now, I would go drink, but I would get sick. So if I really wanted to drink, I'd have to wait. This is the thing about the medication. It has extremely long half-life. So you have to wait like 2 weeks to start drinking again. So the thought process behind it is it allows you to take a pause and think about your actions. Do I really want to do this?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Instead of like, oh my God, let's go to the liquor store. I need to go right now. You have that thought, but then you go, well, guess what? I can't go right now. I mean, I could,
get sick.
But you'll get sick. And I tried every other way about it. I've been to thousands of Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, Narcotics Anonymous meetings, Heroin Anonymous meetings, Methamphetamine Anonymous meetings. I've been to meetings over meetings over meetings, SMART meetings, self-management and recovery therapy meetings. I've been to so many different meetings, and it just wasn't working. I was seeing a therapist and everything, and one of the final things is like, if you're a pretty bad alcoholic, the doctor's going to say, hey, look, dude, you probably should try out some antabuse. And so I did, and that's what's been working.
Do you think you should have been introduced to that earlier?
I guess, and it's a weird thing, though. Like, do I have to take this my whole life?
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's a weird process. Like, the longer you go on relying upon it, does it make it harder to go off it?
It's like a reward, like feedback loop, right? Like if you're gonna get sick from doing it, you want to train your brain to like just not want it earlier than later.
Yeah, it's hard because your brain always does want it. When I was in my last treatment, so I've been to formal treatment 4 times, and the last one, when I was in sober living, I would drink. Here's what I did. I figured out we have to get UAs all the time, which there's so many stories we could go into, but you have to take observed UAs. So you have to go into a room and a guy stands there and watches you, right? Right after I would do that, I would go to the gas station and get a bunch of Mike's Hard Lemonades and sit in my car and drink them and then bring them back. Because I did a bunch of reading about how long the chemicals stay in your system and all this kind of stuff. So I figured it out.
Drug tests only really work for marijuana. I mean,
yeah.
It's so funny.
It's a weird thing, though, when you're in somewhere, Greg, and you're being drug tested. It's just a strange experience. But
you feel like your privacy is kind of...
Oh, yeah. Of course, it's a weird deal. But I'm also kind of happy for all these memories. In some way, like these shitty memories are actually kind of good memories because it teaches you about your tenacity and your like will to survive and things like that. Mm-hmm. So I know that if something bad were to happen, I have great character and great strength and I could overcome it.
Right.
Like, if some guy came in here and started shooting up the place, I think I would respond well to it.
You just go right at him.
I don't know. I'm very comfortable with everything and I've gained a lot of courage from it. Is right. What it is.
Right. You want to almost think of what people would assume as weaknesses as strengths, right? As you go through this path, this road that you've had to go through, and you want listeners to hear about it. I mean, it makes you a stronger person. Don't feel weak,
Yeah, and that's immediately it's a huge theme in any class you'll go to, whether it's outpatient or you're inpatient or you're just seeing your standard therapist. You talk about all kinds of things and you learn how to cope and deal with stuff. Community's huge. We've touched upon that. Giving back is huge and honesty is huge. If you go into a 12-step meeting right now, they have always a little thing that says HOW. Honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. That's what the 12-step programs consider to be the hallmark of recovery. Mm-hmm. And there is something to that. So AA, a lot of people don't like it, but it has some smart stuff. It's the very first program that got people sober in a time where they didn't have modern medicine or anything. Right after the Great Depression, life was, shitty and grimy. and AA was there, and it came around. Yeah. And so you can learn stuff from it. But there are lots of avenues to get help out there.
What's really interesting about AA, I read this book called The Power of Habit, and it was talking about how AA came to be and why it's been so successful, and how it's all about reinforcing habits with like different psychological like vehicles. And that's what the bedrock of AA really is just how to change your habits, how to change your mind chemistry in that way.
People are funny with AA though, because they don't like this. Hi, my name's Bobby and I'm an alcoholic. They don't like that. Right. They're like, oh my God, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm a person, all this kind of stuff, liberal stuff. Yeah, I am an alcoholic.
You have to own it. Right?
You do. Yeah. And that's okay. Now there's a lot of downsides to AA too, but I think that it has a nice core component. The core values and thought processes behind AA are very smart. They were wise for their time of how to overcome all that stuff.
Yeah.
Very wise. That's considered one of the top 100 books of the last century, Alcoholics Anonymous.
Wow.
That's an amazing thing. If you look at all the other books on that list, War and Peace, The Great Gatsby, those are two names, but there's so many things.
No, I want to touch back. Sorry for interrupting you.
No,
I want to touch back. You mentioned your courage and tenacity, and what people, especially I didn't understand when my brother was going through, was through his addiction was addiction is relapse filled. A lot of the times, many people, myself included, was once you're clean, you're good to go and you're cured, and everyone goes on and has a their perfect life, right? You mentioned you went to 4 different rehabs. So basically, what your first rehab was at what age?
Yeah, we can do a brief timeline for the audience. Yeah. My first treatment, I was 27 years old. It was in November of 2013 at Serenity Lane in Eugene, Oregon, on the University of Oregon campus in an old frat house. That's the first treatment center I ever went to.
And that was about, 1 block from our senior year?
Yeah, I could see. I was in the hospital. This is the funniest thing. They have a wing, or it's now a frat house again. They built a whole entirely new campus. But you have to, at that treatment center, I had been sober 12 days prior to entering the program, but you have to go to their hospital wing. And you have to wear a gown and stay in observation for at least 24 hours. So I had a window, and out my window, I could see our old house that I went to college in my junior year. And here I am sitting in the hospital in rehab. But that was my first one. Let's see. The 3 ones after that were all at the same facility in Utah. If anyone is listening and they're wondering good treatment centers, Serenity Lane I'd give a very good grade to. I would give them a solid B, perhaps a B+. Really? I mean, I would definitely recommend people to go there. I went to a place in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I have a soft spot in my heart for Utah because of it, because it's helped me get healthy. It's called Recovery Ways. And I went there 3 different times.
And is that in Salt Lake?
Yeah, the last time I went there was the summer of 2017.
Okay. Then you mentioned you went to Cedar Hills.
Oh yeah, Cedar Hills Detox Hospital. I've probably been there somewhere. I don't know. If we ask my family, they'd probably have a better number. But I think it's somewhere like 10 or 15 times.
Wow.
Because once you get to a certain point of alcoholism, you're gonna have alcohol withdrawal. And that's just the way it goes. So when you're in the midst of all this, in some weird way, you feel like you're like traveling the circuit with all these drunks and junkies. Like you see them every year. Oh, hey, Bob, it's good to see you again. Like you keep showing up to the same places.
Yeah.
Kind of a strange experience.
Now, when we were talking, was it Monday, Tuesday of this week?
Yeah, Tuesday.
You pulled out your phone and you were exactly almost 10 months sober, correct?
Yeah, I think I have 10 months sober right now.
Well, congratulations.
Thanks, man.
That's huge.
That's awesome.
It's pretty cool, yeah. It's a weird feeling. The most days I've ever had sober prior to this was 78 days.
Wow. When was that?
No, that was my longest sobriety after my first treatment. Maybe I got to 90 and then failed again. I don't know, but I'd never gotten really past 90. 60 days really isn't that hard to get. 30 days is pretty easy because you're like right off the trauma of everything and all the bad consequences, so you're pretty motivated. But as time like goes on, especially with alcohol, because it's such a normal component of our everyday social life.
Like with work,
like, hey man,
friends,
pick
grab
up
a
something
drink
at the store on the way home, whatever. Like the funniest experience probably to me, and heroin addicts don't encounter this at all. I don't think anyone does, but alcoholics, to go to a grocery store as an alcoholic. Now, if you really put on your thinking cap and walk around and saw in the store every location where alcohol is at, you go, oh my God. Yeah, like you can't even get cheese without looking at beer. You can't even get in the damn door without there being like a big stack of wine on sale.
Right.
Yeah. You can't get around a grocery store without just almost tripping over cases of whatever happens to be there.
Yep.
So that's kind of a difficult thing too.
So what do you use to remind yourself? I mean,
here's the thing about that, and I was thinking about this the other day. Actually, if you think deeply on it, that might be a good upside because I'm forced to confront it all the time.
Right.
And like if I want to get heroin, let's just say I'm a heroin addict. Well, I bet I could probably go out and find heroin that fast right out that window. But you're not going to like go into a store and like run into heroin. You don't sit in a restaurant and they don't like, you have a bottle of Jose Cuervo, there's Jack Daniels, there's this. It's not like, oh yeah, here's some China White and we got black tar here and oh yeah, we'll throw a little crack in. You don't see that stuff in places. Right. You have to go find it illicitly.
It's under the table.
Exactly.
Right. The fact that alcohol is over the table, as you're saying,
I think it's helpful.
Right.
On some level. It's really frustrating. Mm-hmm. But that's the concept in AA, right? What are the first few steps? Your first step is that you admit that you're powerless over alcohol, that your life has become unmanageable. That's the language that they use. Mm-hmm. And my life was unmanageable. Drinking, I was drinking during school, at law school. I was drunk during finals. Like I took my finals, I remember it vividly. I had a coffee cup. I was taking a property law final and I was sitting in the back row and I had a coffee cup and I was drinking gin and tonic during my test, Wow. And all these are people that are so anal about everything. Right. They wouldn't have like one drop of anything ever, and here I am just pounding drinks in the back row.
Getting A's, pounding drinks.
Crushing it, dude. Right. I was on the law review, yeah. But yeah, it's a hell of a deal.
So I want to kind of talk about, your day-to-day life now, how in recovery, people forget that you still have, cravings,
sure.
every day. I remember, this past January, February, when you were at WeWork,
when they serve booze there too.
Yeah. And I remember
I love it.
The first day something I've been in there for, little over a year now, and not once I've ever thought about it. I might have a beer here and there. I'm not a big drinker, and
oh, sure you are. I've seen you. That's pure lies, audience.
I'm glad
pure
none
lies.
of you have drank with me. So.
But I remember the first. It might have been the first day you were there. You come in my office about midday, and you go, "My God, they have a tap right there." The first thing I see when I come out of my office is 2 taps.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, and I never even thought of that.
It's insane, really.
Yeah.
It's difficult. Cravings. Look, I actually have felt the most like drinking and the most like I want to drink in a very long time in the recent days, and I've been like kind of like nervous for some reason. If you talk to alcoholics or addicts, they often just say stuff like, "Man, we're a weird bunch." You'd have to go and listen to them. There's all these little phrases, but we are weird. I'm quirky. I'm a strange person. I'm not like most people, and when I'm nervous about something, here's what goes through my mind. It's not that I'm like, oh, I'm so nervous. I used to not be a nervous person. It's anxiety. And anxiety is it's a very close cousin of alcohol withdrawal. So what happens when you have alcohol withdrawal is it's a fight or flight response. Mm-hmm. And you are so like, it's like you're terrified. I don't know have any of you ever had the hair stand up on the back of your neck?
Oh yeah.
That's what it's like. And everything's fast moving and you're paranoid. You can hardly breathe. Your hands are literally shaking. You went into a store to buy something. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but if an alcoholic goes into a store and they're trying to buy something, like they need booze right away, they can hardly hold the change in their hand. It's like spilling all over the counter.
Wow.
It sucks. So being nervous or having anxiety makes me want alcohol because alcohol is the absolute best thing I've ever encountered in my entire life to get rid of anxiety. And, you know, you just have to think of it like this. A lot of people, maybe their dad dies, their mother dies. They're not big drinkers. They'll go to the goddamn bar because it is a useful purpose. It gets rid of that. You can stop thinking about stuff for a long time. And I probably haven't done bipolar justice enough in the sense that what it feels like is that your brain is filled with a million thoughts and they won't stop.
That's exactly what my brother always talked about.
Everything is associated. It's so weird. Like if I look over at that shirt over there, it's white and blue. It looks like it came from the Gap. And then you'd be like, oh, you know, the Gap is at Washington Square, Washington, D.C. What a great place. In Washington, D.C., President Trump's there. Trump hotels, gambling, casinos. Your brain starts to just go and you can't stop it. So that's what you try to do is you're like, hey, man, shut up for a second. I need to have some peace and quiet. Mm-hmm. That's what the draw is to alcohol. It's to just give you some tranquility and peace for just 2 seconds. Because for sure, there's like, I don't want anyone to get the picture like I'm sitting there like an emo kid in the bar crying all day. No. Right. I actually had a lot of fun in the bar. I had a great time in the bar all the time. But for a lot of it, it's like you need it as a medicine. Mm-hmm. And it's a really good stand-in medicine. And that's what I've had multiple conversations with professionals about. Look, Bobby, you were probably just doing the best that you could at the time. You didn't know that you had this problem. And hey, guess what? That's what people do. They self-medicate. And that's what happens.
Yeah. So like, do you think anti-anxieties or like the medications you came on, like, does it help with that? Like the voices or just the anxiety feeling that triggers like wanting to dull it?
Sometimes I think everything is, I just accepted a long time ago that I'm going to be different mm-hmm. and my life is going to be different. Mm-hmm. And I just have to roll with the punches kind of a thing. A lot of time I go on and about how unfair everything is sometimes right. because it feels very unfair. Mm-hmm. I didn't ask for it, but I do feel lucky too. Like I could have gotten another close cousin comment, but a close cousin of bipolar disorder is schizophrenia. I could be out howling at the moon on the street, but I'm not. Right. So
no, that's a great thing you just mentioned that you didn't ask for it because you know if you look at articles about mental illness or people with a substance use disorder, right? You see the comments or people talking about it, and they always say, "Oh, it's the person's fault." Mm-hmm. It's their weakness, it's their moral failing. No one who has a substance use disorder asks for this. Right. No one wants to sit in a bar all day and have 40 drinks. It's they don't want to go to rehab.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, 4 times plus the 10 or 15 times at Cedar Hills. Yeah.
Plus regular hospitals. Yeah. There's a lot of it. Yeah.
No one wants to go through that. I find that, and again, it is that stigma and, it's the stigma associated with the, substance use, and it's just so asinine that people think that way.
I don't feel I don't feel the slight, because if I did in fact feel embarrassed or something, there's no way in hell I would come on here and tell everyone all these details.
Sure.
So obviously I'm pretty comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Because I had to be.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? I get one life here on planet Earth, okay? Mm-hmm. So I got to do the best that I can with it. Right. I'm not going to sit around hiding all day and lying to people. I'm just a person too. Yeah. I just have a different health problem. That's all. Yeah. Everybody has different health problems. Some people have diabetes, unfortunately. Some people get cancer. Yeah. Some people have mental illness. Mm-hmm. It's just mental illness we have it pretty good here in the States, despite how bad it is. Can you imagine being a mentally ill person in North Korea? A mentally ill person in Saudi Arabia? Right. A mentally ill person in Russia? I wouldn't want to be mentally ill there. I mean, in this country is better. And we're still not to the point we should be at, but we're doing a much better job than the rest of the world.
The conversation has begun.
Yeah, and it's normal. So, like, if you can have a figure, athletes now coming out talking about things.
Kevin Love.
David Faraday, golf announcer, relapsed, his son died of a heroin overdose. Yeah. He told everybody about it.
Yeah.
David Faraday is bipolar disorder also. Mm-hmm. He's very open about stuff.
Yeah, he's had some very good interviews.
He just, one of his articles, he said when he first got sober, he would sit in his den. So one thing that's funny about David Faraday is he won the the Scottish Open. Now, I don't know what year it was.
Should probably
but it's the
tell
oldest
the audience
trophy.
who David Faraday is.
David Faraday is a golf announcer, former pro golfer, and he won the oldest trophy in the history of sports in the Scottish Open. He got wasted that night, and he woke up on a green like 50 miles away from where he started, naked, and he didn't have the trophy.
What happened to the trophy?
I have no idea. It's back. Phil Mickelson won the Scottish Open a little bit ago. But what was the topic that we were just talking about?
How mental illness...
in our country and everything. Yeah, I think we're doing a better job. What needs to happen, though, is people just have to be open. So it does no one any justice if you don't actually know the nitty-gritty details of it. Mm-hmm. Now, this isn't to glamorize or anything, but to actually know what's going on. That's important. Yeah. So, in further podcasts and further things, you can get into it with people and ask them very in-depth things. And it's good for people to know, because the more people know, the more they'll be able to understand, even if it's just a small portion.
Yeah.
Even just think, if someone listened to this and they were at the office and they know one of their coworkers has a problem like this and they were having a hard day, then they would have a better idea of how to handle it.
Absolutely.
And that's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah. And that's why I kind of want to bring it back to like the duality of like what is normal and what is different, right?
Yeah, exactly.
As you were saying, everybody's got some sort of demon. Everybody's got something that they're dealing with, whether it's on the spectrum of a mental health issue or physical health issue. I mean, do you really feel yourself as different when you have these communities? I mean, I think listeners should feel comfortable in their own skin, because as you were saying, you felt uncomfortable, right, as this was all coming to onset.
Yeah.
Being able to realize the perspective that there are other people like me, I'm not the only one, and I can get through this. Did you have that type of realization at one point that maybe I'm not so different?
Well, I still think I'm very different, and I might push back on that, but yeah, I'm different. So you would just have to be around a group of people that have these problems. It's just it's very palpable that they're different, and that's okay, because I'm pretty well put together for somebody who has my problems. You could speak to somebody that's like me, that's way different, and you'd be like, oh my God, this guy's kind of a crazy dude. I'm just a human being, like I've said, but there is something different about these problems, and it's just good. It's so good to explore them. So good to explore them, because the crisis that we're having in Portland, Oregon with homelessness and all that, that's not a housing crisis. That's a mental health crisis.
Totally agree to
because
that.
they got rid of any facilities for people and everything. Now, the draconian mental hospitals of the 1970s aren't what we need, but you do need facilities where people can go. And they really don't need to be in the middle of the city. The city isn't for that. They should be away, off place somewhere.
Right.
The city is, if you want to get sober, you don't go hang out in the city. There's a bunch of junkies there. What doesn't make any sense?
Right.
You go to some place where that isn't there, where drug dealers aren't there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, we see Burnside Bridge. I mean, we see them lined up.
And I just feel terrible about the thing, because it has nothing to do with housing.
Right.
I've been around all of those people. I told you, I've had multiple mentally ill homeless roommates in hospitals, so I know what it's all about. Those people just need help. It's very sick that our society kind of uses them as a little political football at times.
Totally.
They're just sick. They need help. There's a bunch of sick people out there. Let's go help them.
But that's what should be. Problem.
There's sick people outside living on the streets. That's wrong. Let's fix it. Right. End of discussion. That's all it should be.
Right.
Well, let's take you for example. I mean, imagine like you mentioned in the podcast, you go into an emergency room, go into the hospital, and the doctor says, "Oh, we don't have any room. We can't treat you. Go home and keep drinking." I mean, that's just incredible. And I've heard stories where people who have overdosed on opioids, they go to the hospital, and the recommendation on their discharge papers is stop using drugs.
Yeah, that's great.
No treatment. It's incredible. And quick story for me was back in this past March. I went to the urgent care because my back flared up due to my herniated disc. Went in. I looked at the doctor at the urgent care. I said, I have pretty severe back pain right now, can't really move, can't function a whole lot, but I don't want any sort of pain pill or opioid. Just, some sort of high strength ibuprofen to reduce the inflammation. I told him what happened to my brother just 3 months prior, not even 3 months. He started talking about the opioid crisis and said, us doctors are, we're a lot to blame for that. He's typing on his computer. Then he looks at me and goes, "Are you sure you don't want a pain pill?"
What?
It baffles me. It's incredible that, for the amount of money we pay for healthcare, I feel like the lack of healthcare we have is just, it's awful.
The money that goes into, what a treatment has to make financial sense, right?
Yeah.
If that doesn't become a financial vehicle. And
that's why I've seen firsthand great treatment facilities that I feel like there should be a model of them in Portland, Oregon. So this place, I hope people look it up. The UNI, capital U, capital N, capital I, University Neuropsychiatric Institute.
And this is
Salt Lake City,
Lake.
University of Utah. They do a great job. OHSU should have a thing. That's a joke that they don't have that.
Can you talk about it? Like
why is it a good place?
Yeah, like what is?
Because it's the best place I've ever been to. It's so nice. If you go to Cedar Hills, sometimes it'll take you 2 hours to get back there, and you're like having withdrawals. You're like, Jesus Christ, give me some goddamn Librium or some kind of a benzodiazepine. That place will get you in fast, but it's not only that. The doctors there are such high caliber doctors, and it's a very all-expansive facility. I think Uni is like 5 stories tall. They have so many different units from adolescent. This reminds me, one of the more, I don't even know what the right word would be to describe it. Interesting moments I've ever had in a psychiatric hospital. I'm at Uni. Now, at this place, I'm on 4th South. It's on the upper floor. I'm going down to the kitchen. If you're there for a certain amount of days, they let you just walk down by yourself. So I'm down there. I'm in this big cafeteria, and I'm just in my own head thinking, I'm like, hey, man, what do I need? Apple juice, orange juice. Should I get this? Should I get that? And I'm looking around, and there's probably 40 little kids, and they're probably between the ages of 6 and 12. 40 kids in a mental hospital. And so I'm just looking, and all of a sudden I start to see all of them have scars everywhere, stuff all over their wrists, bandages, because they're trying to kill themselves.
Oh my God.
And there's that many little kids, and there I am just looking at it. So I've had experiences like this that a lot of people have them, but most of the people I know don't. Mm-hmm. But I bring that place up because they treat everybody so well. It's just such a holistic care model, and that's what needs to happen here. You need to have one of the OHSU. That's a joke that they don't have an addiction program.
Right.
I'm not aware of one.
Right.
I've been doing this for a long time. I don't know. Why don't they have one? The only place we have is Cedar Hills Hospital.
Right.
That's not right. We have a big problem. We have the money available to build things to do this. This is always going to be with us. If we don't address it, it will just keep going on. There's a certain percentage of the population that's always going to have it. It's genetic. So you need to have the right facilities. Yeah. It's like, it just makes sense, Like you're not going to build a building now and not put in like stuff for people who are disabled. You accommodate them. People need accommodations. People have these problems, need accommodations. And what a cool thing that Portland could actually say, like, man, we're the epicenter of whatever, drug and alcohol treatment. How cool would that be? You could actually really start doing positive things around here, I think.
Is Uni state funded? Is it a private?
It's a part of the University of Utah, so it's public.
Wow.
The Utah Utes. Sure.
Yeah. So last question, Bobby, to wrap up, for any listeners who are dealing with a substance use disorder right now, what would you want to tell them?
I would tell them to never give up is the number one thing I would say. Never give up trying. Never give up asking questions, seeking out new people, trying to find the answer. The other thing I would say is be easy on yourself, because you're not going to solve everything overnight, especially if you've done a lot of damage over multiple years. It logically makes zero sense that you're going to fix it right away. So unfortunately, you have to be patient. I'd also tell people to make sure to laugh and find humor. Laugh at yourself. I laugh at myself that I'm a lunatic, bipolar drunk all the time. It's hilarious. I've done some goofy stuff. and I've done some great stuff. But the thing is always believe in yourself. The other thing that's big deal, if you are ever having thoughts of hurting yourself or doing anything like that, you always have to tell people. Now, I personally haven't had that experience, but it's extremely common. So don't keep it to yourself. It's part of the problem. Tell people. Tell everybody. That's the number one thing, is be open with your problems.
Yeah. So almost, again, about stigma, like beat society down into the point that stigma is not a thing, that we can speak.
Totally.
You can
and it's
be
not
open
like
with
you have
it.
to
Your
tell
family
everyone
can be open with
on
it.
the max these problems, but like your friends and your family, you have to.
Yeah.
Right. The people around you. Well, thanks a lot for your time.
Yeah, thank you for coming on, Bobby.
Absolutely.
For your honesty and
a good
everything.
time.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Henry's Uncle podcast. Please take a second to like, subscribe, or rate us. But more importantly, please share this podcast with anyone who may be interested in the topics discussed, so they know they are not alone. As always, at Henry's Uncle, you are loved, never judged.